now here is where we get into one of my favorite things in Ableton ever, which is their groove system. So Ableton's groove system is really awesome because what it lets you do is it lets you apply essentially both kind of timing and velocity changes automatically to either MIDI clips or audio clips, whatever you want, right? And so in every clip, you have this groove section down here right next to the controls for what time signature the clip has, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and clear these kind of search settings up here. And right over here, we have this kind of hot swap button, right? And that is the thing that will, when you push the hot swap button next to the groove icon, this opens up our groove pool, right? Which you can also get to with this little drop-down menu where it says tuning and groove pool. And also from the sidebar, there's the grooves menu right here, right? What's nice though is when you have a hot swap open, you can double click on any of these grooves and then that'll just automatically apply that groove to whatever clip you have selected, right? So grooves come in kind of like two types, I would say. The first type, which usually you sort of see near the end of the list, are just like swings in general, right? So what swings are is they're going to take like either every other like eighth note or like every other 16th note or every other like 32nd note, and they're gonna sort of shift those notes back, sort of be off grid and kind of make them come a little later, or sometimes even come a little earlier, depending on which groove you're using. And those lead to things like the sort of natural swing that you would hear in a lot of like house tracks or like hip hop tracks or things like that. Oftentimes there's just essentially like a lot of old drum machines just had like a swing dial or like a shuffle dial, and you would just turn it to the right and it would make every other 16th note be a little bit time shifted later, so that it would give this like, instead of just a straight groove, it would be like kind of a swung groove like that, right? The other type of groove that Ableton gives you, which are kind of the fun ones to use sometimes, are the ones that are sort of like genre and kind of style focused, right? And those, what's cool about them is not only do they give you, I guess, swing, which is kind of like time adjustments, but they also have velocity changes built into them, right? So they can also adjust the kind of volume level over time and sort of change the volume level of each kind of transient and each kind of like little section, right? So let's go ahead and find, to start, maybe a couple of just sort of like swing grooves first, and then we'll do some of the more kind of fun ones. So I'm gonna grab a eighth note swing on setting 59, which is not like a sort of huge amount of swing. And I'm gonna apply that to this first one. All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and grab a 16th note swing. And same thing, but instead of that one, we're going to do swing 16ths onto this clip, right? So now what we've got, if we look at our groove pool over here, I'll open this up. The reason I chose these sort of two different kind of like basses, one of them being kind of an eighth note swing and one of them being a 16th note swing, is again the same reason why I chose different quantized settings for these other two clips that we did when we changed stuff with a quantizer. Just because we want there to be a bigger, wider kind of stereo effect caused by this, right? So how do we feel about how this is going to affect kind of the sound that we're going to be hearing? Do we feel like it's going to be more or less kind of like random timing than the quantization?
Maybe more random, but in a more like natural way.
Possibly. Possibly.
Does it also depend, does the severity like of it depend on like if you have it at 100% or not?
Yes, it does. So we'll get into that in a second, but we have these kind of timing amounts and kind of velocity amount controls for each groove or each sort of like type like grooves that we have, and we can adjust the sort of like timing amount. So right now it's at 100% timing for both of them, right? I didn't pick a particularly heavy swing. 59, we can consider 50 to be zero swing, so 59 is just a little bit. The swings go all the way up to, I think, 73. So it's kind of maybe like a little bit less than kind of halfway to the most extreme swing level that Ableton gives you, right? Let's take a listen.
What I need couldn't get here faster. Chase my dreams just to wake up after.
Right?
Run it back, time I wasted, turn my head one after one. It's a hourglass, all my patience, never lasting, no.
So it's, in my opinion, somewhere in between the randomness of the quantized version and the very, very not random, just sort of like straight time shifted versions, right? Because if you think about it, all we're doing is we're telling Ableton, hey, every other, in this case, every other eighth note that you detect as a transient, shift that eighth note over a bit. And then for this one, it's just saying every other 16th note, shift that 16th note over a bit, right? So it's not making kind of as many sort of like distinct changes compared to when we did the quantize, because remember, the sort of timing of each of these transients was like not super on grid, right? And the quantize is going to take all of the not on grid ones and shift them to be on grid. And how much they get shifted is really determined on how far away from the grid they were in the first place, right? Versus when you do the grooves, especially when you're using swing grooves like this, that are very like, you know, it's a swing groove, but like it's a very even swing groove. The swing doesn't change a lot. It's not going to be making quite as many sort of like extreme sort of adjustments to timing of stuff, right?
Is there something like the grooves in Pro Tools?
Not really. Not really. Yeah. 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 I know. This is sort of like an Ableton kind of like mainly focused kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. They're.
I know Logic has like a, in their quantized function, they just have a swing, like you said, like a home drum machine.
Yeah.
A swing thing, but you can't really change what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed a lot of DAWs do have that. They'll just have like kind of like a static like swing. I think the other DAW that I've been teaching myself recently is Bitwig Studio, and their swing I think works similarly to Logic. You can at least adjust whether it's like 8th notes or 16th notes, but there's just like one dial that kind of adjusts it. Yeah. And it also has a really hard time being applied to audio as well in Bitwig, I've noticed. You have to like go in and like manually chop up your audio files at each transient and then apply swing so that it shifts each chopped up, you know, division of the audio clip that you're using. Versus in Ableton, one of the fun things that you can do in Ableton is you can set a couple of warp markers inside of a clip, and then you can just start stretching and compressing shit like this, right? And obviously this is gonna lead to, I'll say, very, very extreme timing differences, right? Let's listen to this now.
What I need couldn't get here faster.
Right, so not necessarily something that you want to do. Subtlety is kind of the name of the game in this technique specifically, because if you make sort of shifts in sort of like either time or shifts in pitch that are kind of too extreme, you'll either get things that sound like delays and things that sounds like things are kind of off time from each other and like very obvious that like, you know, there's sort of like multiple things happening at once rather than it sounding like one big, thick, cohesive thing. Or if we go back to like maybe these pitched things over here, if instead of changing the pitch by cents, we changed it by like steps. Let's go like plus 4 there, and then maybe plus like, or sorry, we'll go to like minus like 7 on that one. Now instead of this sort of thick kind of chorus effect, we get
What I need couldn't get here faster.
just a chord, right? Which can be cool, but obviously you heard that doesn't sound like the most naturally sung chord in the world, right? It would probably be a little bit better to, if you wanted to truly do like harmonies of different notes, maybe just record yourself singing different harmonies, right? Although one thing that you can do is in Ableton, we're using the complex warp mode. The complex pro warp mode does a little bit of a better job at preserving the formant of audio compared to when it's pitch shifted. So we switched these other two clips to complex pro, and now
What I need couldn't get here faster.
it sounds a little bit more natural.
If you'd like full access to these workshops, plus our full course catalog and guidance from coaches and industry pros, reach out about joining our Complete Producer program.